It's difficult to describe why Final Fantasy VII means so much to me. It has such breadth. It's not just a traditional story about the world ending and the heroes that rise up to face it. It's about a childhood love, and a new love that might actually be a misplaced old love. It's about a pain so deep that it hurts other people, veiled behind a misguided altruism for the planet. It's about doing more squats than the other guy, trying to match your fellow soldiers and giggling when you screw it up. It's about experiencing a whole world in a huge industrial city, then stepping outside its perimeter into a larger universe. It's about iconography, huge swords, head-to-toe flames, omnislash, Knights of the Round, and motorcycles smashing out of windows onto a freeway. It's about snowboarding, feeding nuts to Mog, and chocobo racing. And it's about loss. For those who don't know, Final Fantasy VII is about a villain named Sephiroth, who is trying to destroy the world, and the people trying to protect it. Cloud, the ex-soldier, an elite fighting group. Tifa, Cloud's best friend, bar owner, and probably the strongest woman in the world. Barrett, a terrorist who protects the planet.
You gonna stand there and pretend you can't hear the planet crying out in pain?
Ares, a flower girl who can mysteriously communicate with spirits. Red 13, a warrior from an ancient race. Cid, a pilot burdened by a failed dream of going into outer space. Kate Sith, a big, remote-controlled toy. Yuffie, a young ninja obsessed with materia. And Vincent, a tortured man who now lives in the world like a kind of specter, driven to live a life of penance due to a sin he thinks he has to bear. Together, they work towards trying to defend the planet from Sephiroth and Shinra, an electric power company that is so wealthy and influential it infiltrates and runs much of the world. For me, there isn't another media experience like FF7. I played it at just the right time in my life, when I was a teenager. Being a teen is kind of a magical place. When you're a teen, you have a better developed sense of self and the world than when you were a child. Your mind is open and learning, but your responsibilities are still small. Time is greater. And you've experienced less, both in stories and life. So experiencing something new is profound. You're hungry for inspiration, guidance, and story, and are able to disseminate so much more information than when you were a child, and process so much more emotion. The things that meant a lot to us when we were teens occupy a unique place in our hearts. They were our first big things. A first love, a deep friendship, and sometimes just a story that became a part of who we are. When I watch moments from FF7 now, I'm transported back to a time when a full day could be dedicated to puttering around its world, without guilt, interruption, or consequence. A time when everything was new and hopeful, and when my spirit hadn't been chipped away at by the realities of life. A warmth I will never know again, because we can't go home. I think a part of why FF7 had such a profound impact on me and so many others was that it was not only the kind of grand experience I was craving, but it was also my first role-playing game. Many game genres can be played in a simple and straightforward manner, but have more depth. RPGs can be like that too, but to a lesser extent. You can barbarian your way through RPGs for a time, using only attack in battles, never learning about or using magic or other systems, never buying new items at the store, and never learning how to cure or heal yourself. The question is, how far will that take you? Probably pretty far in FF7, to be honest. Which is helpful because FF7's story and systems are enormous. The game is just so big. From the start, it's just a few specks of life flowing out a grate in an alley, and the camera follows them into an enormous city. The first major chunk of the game is in this city, and you think it's your whole world. But then the game expands. And to not know about turn-based fighting systems, or how to raise and use materia, or what items cure blindness, or how often to save, or what strategies to use against what enemies, or how strong your characters should be, or where you should go, It's almost like you lack all the tools you need to play the game. The internet was young back then too, so you were cobbling together resources from one guide to the next, and combining it with maps from Brady games. I used to have binders full of dot matrix printed pages, walkthroughs mixed with guides on how to manipulate which character you get to date in the game. Beyond the breadth of learning required for the game, even the backgrounds were epic in scale. We went from this in Final Fantasy VI to this, and this. There's so much tragedy to FF7's characters, which isn't something new to Final Fantasy. Like Locke from FF6, who is compelled to protect women because he couldn't protect the one he loved. Or Rydia from FF4, who loses her mother at a young age, and has to figure out how to grow up in a world without her. But something about FF7's characters is so intimate. Tifa evolves into such an example of love and devotion. Cloud should be nothing to her, but she loves him nonetheless, forgoing the world and her life to take care of him. Barrett is the tie to Midgar. He sometimes seems out of place with the other characters. He talks differently. He is often brash where most of the characters are reserved. He put a gun on his arm because he expects to fight for the rest of his life. Or maybe that was the only way he'd feel safe. But I think Barrett is there because he serves as a constant reminder of Midgar, his home and where the game starts, where you came from. That huge section of the game that feels like your whole world. Barrett is the example of all those lives and people you touched. The guy in the sewer, the kid with the hiding place in his room, Ares' mom, and Marlene, Barrett's adopted daughter. He reminds you of all the little lives you're protecting, not just this faceless mass of people on the planet. Cid is, to me, the most haunting character along with his partner Shayra. The day Cid's dream was about to come true, she was on the rocket, making sure the launch was successful. She was making a final check near the engines, and wasn't going to finish until the launch began. But she was fine with that, if it meant Cid's dream of going into space could come true. But Cid couldn't let her die. So he aborted the mission and his dreams. And now Shayra lives with Cid in this kind of ever-apologetic servitude, when deep down I think they love each other. But Cid just can't get over his resentment and disappointment. Even Cid's theme is so stagnant. Much of the melody oscillates between a few notes, because Cid, like his dreams, is going nowhere. The only change in the tune is to convey moments of melancholy. Later in the game, when you're on the rocket for a second time, and Shayra is there again in secret, she finds you and takes you to the escape pod, but I can't help but wonder if Shayra was there, planning to sacrifice herself, to make sure that at least Cid's rocket would make it to space, as if it would be the only apology he would accept. And then there's Ares. There's this war online to this day about Tifa versus Ares. And yes, I'm calling her Ares. That was her name in the North American version I first experienced. Sorry to all the remake people and Aerith supporters. Some of it is, which one is hotter? Others it's, which one do you love? Others it's, who is a better match for Cloud?
俺は許されたいんだと思う。俺は許されたい。
誰に?
Ares is so disarming. There's a scene where Tifa says, "Thank you, Miss Ares," which is really just a translation of Aerith-san, a term of respect in Japanese. But she doesn't want people to be formal. She just wants people to let her in. And she's so charming with her giggles and upbeat personality, like when she's laughing about deciding to dress up Cloud as a girl. There's a lot of focus put on Ares, and I don't think it's just because the game wants to make her death more meaningful, though there's no mistaking its weight in the game. The game mourns her. Her theme plays after her death, through the boss battle that follows it. and each character mourns her. Depending on who's in your party, you get a different sequence. Yuffie is the epitome of youth. She feels everything all at once and explodes, leaning on Cloud for help. Tifa's reaction is my favorite. It's just too much. Her rivalry with Ares over Cloud, their mutual respect for each other, and the fact that, on this journey, since the game is designed to work without Yuffie, she's the only other girl. The game's date sequence is designed for Ares. It's a bit of work to get it to be Tifa, and even more work to get it to be Yuffie or Barrett. On the date, the game works so hard to create swells of emotion, to make the date meaningful. And by giving you choices on the date, it's almost like the game responds to you, how you feel. At times, it feels like the game is obsessed with Ares. But why? Why is Cloud? Why is she the first and last person we see? Cloud may be the main character, but in a lot of ways, Ares is the hero of the story. Discovering who she is, finding out what she has to do, and sacrificing herself so that she can save the world. Everyone else in the game is heroic, but they're all just trying to catch up to Ares, the young flower girl from Sector 7, who saves the world. These haunting character stories line up with the awkward, polygonal sprites that navigate FF7's world. But their stories are what give those sprites life and texture. Yes, especially zoomed in, the sprites flicker and seem barren, but they still carry so much soul. Like the rest of the storytelling in the game, they weave a rich tapestry. Like how when you leave Midgar, you have all these little fractures and questions like, how do Tifa and Cloud know each other? Who is Sephiroth really? How does Ares and everyone else all fit into this? Then Cloud tells his story in the town of Calm, and suddenly these fractures become part of a whole. Everyone has questions they need answered together. Tifa and Cloud want to know more about what happened with Sephiroth 5 years ago. Ares wants to learn more about her past. Barrett wants to stop the Shinra and save the planet. All their personal journeys are tied together. It becomes a story we're building together on a grander scale. And the framing in the game is just so epic. Like the scene with Sephiroth in the Shinra Mansion library. You could simply have Sephiroth framed from the front, showing him with a book in hand, and maybe a bookshelf or two behind him. But the game frames him like this, at the end of a long hall of books, roaming from shelf to shelf, as if he read all of them, the entire history of the world. The game is so careful not only to frame where you've been, but where you're going. When Cloud falls to the roof of the church, we start on a shot that not only shows the flowers he falls on, but also the back of the church where the threat, Reno, enters. Or the scene where Dyne kills himself. Dyne is Marlene's real father who, alongside Barrett, discovered that their hometown had been burned by Shinra. In the scene there are not only two crosses that foreshadow the coming death, but there's also the house with the broken roof, symbolic of how Dyne, Barrett, and Marlene, no matter what they do, will be part of a broken home. Then there's the way the story ramps up on the second disc. There's such a change in scale. Before we were just searching for Sephiroth. Now Cloud is gone, Meteor is coming, and more immediately so is Weapon, while Tifa is stuck in a gas chamber. And then the buildup of that tension breaks, and we're in the sky, free, on the high wind. There was this series of letters in Paste magazine by Leigh Alexander and Kirk Hamilton. Leigh is like me, someone who played and loved Final Fantasy VII in their youth, and Kirk had never played the game before. They wrote a series of letters to each other as Leigh replayed the game and as Kirk played it for the first time, writing to each other about their experiences. It's one of my favorite video game write-ups of all time. In it, Kirk suggests that the crude graphics of the game make it more like a book than a video game. He says, "As I play, I'm picturing all three of my party members moving together, chatting, trading materia, on their guard and ready for a random attack. The degree to which I'm required to see things through my mind's eye makes a significantly different impression than, say, Mass Effect 2 or Red Dead Redemption. It engages my brain much like a good book, rather than a current generation video game. Have we truly forgotten how potent and vital imagination is? I dare say that many big-budget game developers may indeed have. In fact, I'll go one further and say that the makers of Final Fantasy even forgot. For all the color-drenched dazzle of Final Fantasy XIII's Blu-ray cutscenes, I found myself shutting down as I watched them. My eyes were overwhelmed, but my imagination was left fairly untouched. Experiencing the game again recently, I identified with Cloud differently. Cloud has a half-measure personality for a main character. Especially at the start of the game, he's kind of aloof and uncaring. He doesn't often say his needs or wants. Sometimes he just gestures. Later we see a bit more of his vulnerability and his uncertainty in himself. I also saw so much more to his rivalry with Sephiroth. Not only does Cloud idolize Sephiroth, but he wants to be strong like Sephiroth so that he can be strong for and impress Tifa. So when Sephiroth betrays Cloud, he not only corrupts Cloud's ideal for himself, but Cloud's innermost desire to be strong for himself and Tifa. That Sephiroth burns down Cloud's hometown and hurts Tifa is like the physical wound that inflicts the psychological ones. That's why Cloud's feud with Sephiroth is so personal. For Cloud, it's almost hometown first, Aerith second, planet third. The game structures the experience for us in this way too. We spend so much time in Nibelheim, its memory, its fake incarnation, its stories. At times, Cloud's hometown feels like our hometown in this world. And Aerith. Saving the world is not just a thing we do. We're out to settle things with Sephiroth. For our hometown, and for a young woman so pure she tended to a patch of flowers in a church, who convinced the life stream and all the spirits of the planet to bear themselves against Meteor, a decision the planet may not have made without her. Even after Cloud's work is done, part of him knows that even if he can find a way to see her again, it won't be the same. Just like we can go back and see Final Fantasy VII, but it won't be the same either. But that doesn't mean we forget what Aerith meant to Cloud, and what FF7 means to us.